My name is Fr.Daniel Brandt. I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of Chicago. I could date my religious vocation back to about 3rd grade. I remember having attended Our Lady of Ransom grade school, Catholic school in Niles, Illinois. I had the good example of the nuns teaching in the school and the priests in the parish throughout my time there at Our Lady of Ransom. And then into high school, I remained active in the youth group and just had really, really fine examples in the clergy that was present at that parish. And I kind of put off my religious vocation, going to a public high school and then on to a public university, getting a degree in accounting and management from Northern Illinois University, and then working in the 9-to-5 world for a few years. I finally decided to give the seminary a shot, and I applied for the major seminary, the graduate level seminary, St. Mary of the Lake in Mundelein, Illinois. And I thought I'd give it a year and see if I liked it, and I did. I loved it, and gave it another year, and then next thing I know, 5 years later, it was time to move on to ordination. And like I say, I was ordained May of '99. After ordination, I served for 6 years as the associate pastor of St. William Parish on the far west edge of Chicago. Then I moved on to become pastor of a parish on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood called Bridgeport, and had a wonderful term there as associate pastor. And the whole time I was there, I also helped out with the Police Chaplains Ministry. My successor, Father Tom Nangle, was the police chaplain for 30-some years here in Chicago. And as he started getting closer to retirement, he was kind of looking for someone, one, to help him out and help him get a day off, and cover him if he got a vacation, and two, to eventually take his place when he did retire. And things worked out great. I went, after helping him out for several years, 6 or 7 years as assistant, it came time for him to retire, and my term came to an end at the parish, and then I seamlessly transitioned into full-time ministry with the police department. And I've been doing that now for 8 years, full-time. I'm the director of the Chicago Police Chaplains Office, and working alongside me are 4 sworn officers who represent different faiths. They're all involved in ministry, but they're also police officers. Between them, they have about 80 years of police experience. And we also have a rabbi and a Greek Orthodox priest who help us out part-time in the chaplain's ministry. So we're very well-rounded. So even though I am full-time with the police department and no longer assigned to a parish, I do reside at a parish and live with other priests in the rectory, and I help out quite a bit in the parish. And so living and helping at the parish of Resurrection on the northwest side of Chicago in a little neighborhood right off the Kennedy Expressway, very convenient location, perfect for my work because I'm on that expressway several times a day. It's nice to be grounded, to remain grounded and connected to parish ministry, which is something that most parochial or something that most diocesan priests are ordained to serve in that kind of setting. So it's nice to remain connected to a parish while performing this incredibly rewarding ministry. My parish, my actual parish, takes up 231 square miles, takes up the entire city of Chicago. And I have 12,000 souls, 12,000 sworn officers who are members of the Chicago Police Department. We minister to them and their families, as well as our thousands of non-sworn or civilian employees, and our thousands of local retirees, those who retired and stayed here in Chicago or in the Chicagoland area. We have quite a big flock.
Dan, you've served at several different parishes, and before coming to this ministry, the Chicago Police Department Chaplains, what drew you to this work?
You know, I have always been fond of the work that our first responders do, whether they be in the fire service or law enforcement. Likewise, very fond of our brave men and women who serve in the military. And I'm thrilled to be able to help them and remind them of the sacred nature of their work as often as I can. As far as the police chaplaincy, it kind of found me. Back in the early 2000s, I was at St. William Parish on the far west edge of Chicago, And the pastor there, my boss, was friends with then police chaplain Father Tom Nangle, who served as police chaplain for about 30 years. And he needed some help with a wake service for a retired police officer, which was way on the west side of Chicago. And Father Nangle had a conflict downtown at the same time that day. So he called his buddy, my pastor, my boss, and asked if one of the priests in the house could go over and take care of the wake service. So I was sent, and then the next day, Father Nangle reached out and said, thank you, and would you mind if I call you in the future once in a while? Just, if I need a little backup, a little help. And so that kind of began our relationship. And I spent 6 years there at St. William as associate pastor, and then I went to the south side, to Bridgeport, became pastor at Nativity of Our Lord for another term, and continued my relationship with the police, helping Father Nangle out in his ministry. And then finally, as my term was coming to an end and he was looking at retirement, we asked Cardinal George if we could make something work where I would take over for Father Nangle in this vital ministry. And it was a seamless transition. It really went smoothly. The Holy Spirit was certainly active in it. And as of July 1st of 2011, Father Nangle retired and I took over as full-time chaplain.
Tell us about your role and who do you serve?
Well, I serve about 13,000 or so active police officers here in Chicago, plus their families. And then we have 6,000 or 7,000 local retirees, folks who retire from the job but don't move away. A lot of folks, when they retire, they move to a warmer climate or move away from the city because when they are working for the city, they must live in the city. And so some of them might move out to the suburbs and or to another state. Anyway, the local retirees we serve as well, visiting them in hospitals and nursing homes, unfortunately burying them or celebrating their funeral masses, funeral liturgies when they pass away. And we're on for their families as well. These folks, many of them already have a parish. However, because of the nature of some of the things they experience, they prefer oftentimes when they're dealing with some awful situation, maybe a post-traumatic stress issue, they feel, I think, more comfortable with someone who's well-versed in the dirty side of what they do, the ugly side of law enforcement. In addition to the active and retired sworn members, we're also on for our several thousand civilian employees, those who are not the police, but support the police as employees of the police department. So
you mentioned your predecessor, Father Tom Nangle. What valuable lessons did you learn from him? And how do you approach the work?
I'm glad you asked because I did a lot of learning under his watch. I think the most important thing he taught me was that these men and women who are out there in the dirt, in the world, in sometimes very awful situations, they are doing God's work. And it's our job as chaplains to remind them as often as we can that they are doing God's work. They might report to bosses like yourself before you retired. You were a sergeant, of course. They might report to sergeants, to lieutenants, to captains and commanders. But at the end of the day, they are doing God's work. And it's our job to remind them of that sacred work that they do as often as we can, because they often at the end of the day feel like, did I make a difference? Maybe they locked up one or two bad guys, but guess what? There are hundreds of them that they didn't lock up that day. But that one or two are one or two a day, getting some bad folks off the street, helping people. That's what it's all about.
Let's talk about the suicide rate of our police officers. 5 in the last 6 months. You were called to the Illinois House of Representatives to testify about police suicide awareness and prevention. What stressors are you seeing in these police officers' lives to make this arise?
Sure. As you well know, John, police officers work in a realm where there's kind of three realities. One, dealing with the public. They're a very public persona, and they're out there oftentimes disliked, oftentimes ridiculed, spit on. I've seen any number of times when we drive down the street when I'm with other officers or in an unmarked car even, because those unmarked cars that Chicago has are pretty, even a blind person can tell they're a police car. And you'll see somebody walking across the street and they'll make eye contact and then they'll spit on the ground to show their disdain for police. And this adds up over time. It's not just the sometimes hatred of the public, or at least the less educated public. I think the well-informed public realize and are grateful for the sacred work that our officers do. Those who are actually paying taxes and God-fearing, law-abiding citizens, by far, they appreciate what the police do. But in the neighborhoods where these officers serve, and some of the other neighborhoods where you don't find those folks that I just mentioned, it's a whole different animal. And then inside the police department, they have to deal with bosses. They have to, keep their performance up and their numbers up, and they have to stay within a certain amount of physical fitness and be able to write reports and do make their bosses happy, basically, because their bosses report to other bosses and have to report on what the underlings are doing. So there's a lot of pressure from within the department as well as the public. And then finally, the third area is when they finally go home at the end of the day. And they have to turn off this police mode, which is not easy to do, and turn on family mode, where in the world, when they're out there doing their job, they have to be in charge. What they say goes. It's hard to turn that off when you go home, as I'm sure you well know. But you have to be able to do that where you're not anymore that authoritative figure. Yeah, maybe you're a dad or the husband, partner of a head of household, but you're still, or a mom, I should say. I don't mean to neglect or forget the female officers we have, which are a great gift to our department. But you have to be able to find some balance there, and that's a real tricky balancing act for some of our folks. I always recommend when they walk in that door to leave their shoes at the door. Take their shoes off, and that's kind of symbolic of leaving all that dirt that you just walked through for the last 8 or 10 hours, and leaving all those stressors at the door, and then coming in without shoes on. Because without shoes on, of course, you're more vulnerable too. You would never go into a situation where not wearing shoes. So it's good to be vulnerable when you're at home. You can't be when you're out on the street. You can't trust what people tell you when you're out on the street. Police officers are very cynical people, as you know. But at home, you have to be able to trust and believe and know that you're in a safe space. So that's a real tough transition for some of our folks. They live in these three worlds, and to balance between the three, the public, the bosses, and then and when I say bosses, it's not just bosses within the department, but of course, City Hall. There's a lot of politicians who have a lot of say, unfortunately, in law enforcement. So that second world is very difficult for them to be part of. And then finally, of course, transitioning to home every day. These fellas and ladies fight the never-ending war. When our brave soldiers go off to war, they come home after so many months or whatever period of time. This war goes on for 25, 30, 35 years, however long an officer's career is. So these are big stressors. Unfortunately, sometimes they choose unhealthy lifestyles. Some officers unfortunately kill themselves slowly by maybe making poor choices, perhaps relying on alcohol to kind of deaden the pain or to ease themselves. I've heard officers say they can't sleep at night if they don't have a few drinks in them. They have to drink themselves to sleep, basically. That's suicide in a slow manner. But then, unfortunately, also, police officers have the tool right on their hip to commit suicide. And that's perhaps why, one of the many reasons why nationwide the statistic is that a police officer is twice as likely to take their own life as they are to be killed by an aggressor.
Can you describe your approach in helping officers and their families thrive?
Well, we have a multifaceted way of doing exactly that. I am the directing chaplain of the Chicago Police Department, but I have 5 other chaplains. 4 of them are sworn officers assigned full-time to our unit. One is a Catholic deacon with 20 years of law enforcement. Another one is a pastor of a church on the west side of Chicago, also with 20 years experience. One is a Muslim imam, and he has 18 years of law enforcement. And one is a deacon in the Methodist church, and she has also 18 years. So between them, they've got 75 years of law enforcement experience, so they can relate well with our officers, as I like to think I can too, even as a civilian. And we have one other civilian, Rabbi Moshe Wolf, representing obviously the Jewish faith, and he has been helping us out for probably 30 years as a part-time chaplain. So We've got quite a team, and you mentioned families, so we each have different charisms. Our Catholic deacon is big into suicide awareness and prevention, and then treatment, taking care of families after a suicide, and taking care of those who have lost loved ones to suicide, whether it be the officer who committed suicide or who died by suicide, or a family member of the officer. We've had officers whose children, unfortunately, have taken that route, and so he ministers to those folks. The female chaplain, Kimberly is her name, and she's the deacon in the Methodist Church. She kind of specializes in police marriage. She's married herself to a police officer here in Chicago, and they have children, and they know well the stressors that police couples have when both are officers. But even when it's not both being officers, when one is a civilian and one is an officer, obviously there are certain stressors in that relationship that are unique to those in law enforcement. So Kimberly has really taken on taking care of or looking after the needs of our police couples, whether they be both police or just one, and police families. And she organizes every year some retreats, movie nights or date nights for police officer couples, and also events for the children of law enforcers. So we try to address the needs of our police families through Kimberly's work.
How do you keep your own spirit healthy in a tough police environment?
Prayer is one great aspect. I also have a great support system between professional help through our department. I never hesitate to chat with our folks. We have a terrific EAP, or Employee Assistance Program, and those are professional counselors who treat our officers, and I'm always eager to bounce ideas off of them or our police survivors group. And you know, they make for a great sounding board. So between that, my own spiritual director, my family, I'm one of 5 kids, and my folks, thank God, are alive and well, and we get together on a very regular basis, very close. So I've got them as a support system, and then both priest friends and non-priest friends who kind of keep me grounded. And they're good reminders to me that I'm doing, I like to think, God's work.
Father, can you leave us with something that's going to give us hope here, that things that are coming up from your ministry that you can see that are taking a hold, that are taking effect?
Our ministry to Gold Star families, of course, are families who have lost a loved one in the line of duty. Unfortunately, this past year, 2018, we added 4 new families to the ranks of Gold Star families: the Bauer family, the Marmolejo family, the Gary family, and the Jimenez family, who all lost loved ones in the line of duty. And it was a rough year. In fact, we'll be honoring them at memorials next month in Springfield and Washington, D.C. In any case, our ministry to Gold Star families is one of my most rewarding ministries. Twice a year, my office hosts them. Police Chaplains Ministry hosts our Gold Star families on a spring boat cruise, which we'll be doing next month. And then in the winter months, we have a holiday dinner, a pre-Christmas dinner at Soldier Field. So we take them out on a boat on Lake Michigan, one of those big cruise ships that pull out of Navy Pier. Mm-hmm. And we take over the whole boat, and these folks get to come together, and they have one thing in common that they don't want to have in common. But they're a great support to each other, and to be able to facilitate them coming together and really ministering to each other, it's remarkable. And that continues on thanks to the support of so many of our generous supporters, people who continue to make possible our ministry. And then the Christmas dinner, likewise, we do it a few weeks before Christmas. Very elegant affair up at Soldier Field, club level, and I have nothing to do with the ministry that happens at those events other than bringing the folks together. I basically just sign the check at the end of the night. They do all the rest. They minister to each other. So these 4 new families who just joined the ranks of a club nobody wants to belong to will be well taken care of in the years to come, thanks to others who've been through what they've gone through recently and can honestly say, I know how you feel, I know what you're feeling. So that brings me great hope, because police officers work dangerous They do dangerous work, as you know, and sometimes it costs them their life. And their loved ones carry the burden of that loss for forever. So if we can, in some little way, lighten that burden and remind these people that their sacrifice is never forgotten. Sometimes I'm asked questions that are very difficult to answer, like how does God permit such things to happen as violence? How does God permit that? And He is an all-good and all-loving God. It's a tough question to ponder. It's a tough question to answer, probably an impossible question to answer. But I like to accompany people in their pondering of such questions. And I hope that through my presence, and ministry of presence can often be a real gift in itself. Even though I don't have the answers, at least I have two good ears. Sometimes it can be draining, this work. It can be exhausting, quite frankly, especially when called out at different hours of the night. I'm called out now as a police chaplain at all kinds of goofy hours to all kinds of different locations, which is much different than I was accustomed to in parish ministry. But it's also very life-giving. As draining as it can be, I do have opportunities to take retreats, spiritual direction. I spend time with family and friends, both priest friends, non-priest friends. I get to be energized and renew myself, because there's a reason when you're on an airplane they tell you to take that mask and put it on your own face before helping those around you. In the same way, I can't be of much help to others if I don't take care of myself. So there are ways that we can do that offered by the church and outside the church. And it's very important to keep that inner flame alive so that you can share it with others.
To all of the viewers of Shalom TV throughout the world, I want to encourage you not only to support this amazing media apostolate, but to spread the word to others. We all know how the internet and mass media are polluting the world with the poison of pornography and so much other forms of materialism. This is the source of eternal life, the gospel, and Shalom TV is consecrated to spreading the word of Christ. Thank you.